Welcome in to Chords and Courts. I'm your host, Sean Cavanaugh. It's going to be a new podcast where basically we look at the intersection of music and sports. You know, you hear it all the time with athletes always want to be musicians, and musicians always want to be the all-stars. You look at a guy like J. Cole, who's chasing his dreams, even though he's right at the top. He's at the pinnacle of the music industry, something that's so hard to get to, and yet he's still chasing those dreams of playing on the hardwood, even going all the way over to Africa and playing for a team in Rwanda just to live out that dream. And you see it all the time going back and forth. And that's kind of what we're going to look at in this podcast, really study how these two genres and these two worlds might seem so far apart. You know, there's not a lot of people who are super into music who love sports, and the other way around, a lot of people think of them as, you know, very separate entities. But I think if you really study it and you really look at the people involved in these things, that there's a lot of intersect. You see a lot of times super fans are musicians on the sidelines. They're always on the court side, you know, being the first ones to spend that money because they just love the game. And then the other way around, where there's a lot of athletes who aren't afraid, you know, to jump in the crowd with a bunch of people just because they love music. So that's really what we're going to look at this podcast, just the intersection of those two genres. And to do that, we're going to start with this first episode with my man, Danny Burke from VSiN. You can catch him on Monday through Friday, the Rush Hour on VSiN, and Bet on Chicago, another show where he focuses on his hometown sports teams of Chicago. Bring you in, Danny, my former colleague over at VSiN. Obviously, you have a little bit more of a sports background like me, where our sports career ended a little bit earlier than we would have liked, but we've still made sports our world and have found a way to connect to music as well. So, Danny, how's it going?
It's going good, my man. I appreciate you having me on. And, you know, I'm very excited to kind of get into this because you're right. You know, all these things kind of interlace in the sense that, especially when it comes to, you know, hip hop more specifically, with guys like you mentioned, J. Cole, the perfect example as of late. And I mean, you just talk about, you hear it on rap songs and stuff too. Like, you know, rappers want to be athletes, athletes want to be rappers. And I was actually thinking of this the other day, Sean, and let me know if you recall, but I think it was like LeBron James, maybe not his rookie year, but when he was younger, maybe it's when they were going to the Olympics. He was really young. It was him and maybe not Kevin Durant, but someone else. There's like three of them, and they recorded a rap song, and it was obviously just the most awful thing of all time. But for some reason, that popped into my mind the other night, and I was like, wow, I need to find that video. But it's funny because it's true, because, you know, once you reach the pinnacle of so-and-so sport or as being a musician, I feel like you become friends with these people and you're like, man, that lifestyle would be fun too. So it's always kind of interesting to see those two types of people kind of get together and, you know, want to get into the other venture. Obviously, it's a lot harder for the musician to do it to the athlete rather than vice versa, you would think. But, you know, it's still just two big aspects that are very exciting and, you know, our favorite things.
Yeah, exactly. And the two things we're probably most passionate about, and you see that we're not alone. My friend who his dad's a musician and had a recording studio down here in Orlando, and he said he used to get guys from the Magic just come through to try and, you know, record songs and record raps. And Vince Carter was just in his house one day trying to record an album. And it's not like that ever gets anywhere, but these guys love it so much that, like we said, they're at the peak. You think, oh, their world's set, they don't want anything, but they're still chasing these dreams. And then for all those guys like Vince Carter who don't get things released, you still have, and like Kobe Bryant, who has some album out there that we kind of don't really talk about because it's not great, but he still tried and he's still out there. A guy like Shaq, who has, you know, I don't know how well he sold, but he definitely had multiple albums. And then all the way up to the guy like Dame Dollar, who's doing it, and even in commercials as a rapper instead of a basketball player sometimes. So these two worlds are really more connected than I think a lot of people might expect on the surface, because the skill sets are so different. So I kind of want to just jump right into the conversation, Danny. And my idea for this podcast, start off with the same question, going to ask every guest. When you were playing sports, so for you, high school, football and basketball, right?
Yeah, in high school, it kind of went with a few. I mean, basketball, you know, naturally got cut short, pun intended, I guess you could say, because of my height. But I mean, basketball is still like one of my favorite sports to play, but baseball and football were really the main ones throughout high school.
Okay, so I guess you can answer this with each sport specific, but when you were back in those days, you were riding the bus, you were in the pregame warmups, you had the headphones in. what was the last pump up song you listened to? What was the go-to one? The last one before you took the field, before you had to finally let go of the music? What was the last one you always listened to get ready?
So I wrote a few down because I'd like to switch it up a lot, but I think probably the number one I will say is "Till I Collapse" by Eminem. Now you have to remember
Classic.
kind of like, yes, you have to remember like the era we were in and what we grew up in, and like the Eminem songs like "Lose Yourself," "Till I Collapse." Those were like two at the top for sure that were like the pump up ones. But
Oh,
"Till
for
I
sure.
Collapse" is probably a little bit more than "Lose Yourself." That was always like the last one right before we're going in. And speaking of football, so we got to like choose our walkout song, obviously Friday nights, getting pumped, and we kind of had a couple different ones that we did, which were awesome. And you wouldn't think of like that it would be necessarily, but when you're walking into the environment, all the adrenaline going, the fans going crazy, the Bad Boys theme song from the show Cops is
Yes.
just absolutely filthy. That is so sick to walk into. It just gets you going. And then "Gimme Shelter" by the Rolling Stones. That's kind of a low key one too that
Oh,
gets you going. So
interesting
those
if
two
you
are,
really dive into the lyrics for that one.
yeah.
Like you're thinking more of like the music and kind of Mick Jagger
Right.
howling in the background, then the lyrics of that one really gets you pumped up as like
Yeah.
a
Yeah. Like the beginning
revolutionary
of it.
war song. But
Exactly. Okay. And then there's one that kind of I always thought about and I was like, because sometimes I think, oh, this would have been a sick walkout song. I don't think anyone talks about this, but this one's kind of a little bit more random. But "The Ends" by Travis Scott. Now, this was from his album back in 2016, "Birds in the Trap Sing" by McKnight, I think is what the album was. But this
yeah,
song is like not one of the most popular ones by any means, but something about kind of the music and how it switches halfway through and right when it clicks, I feel like that would be a sick point to just like sprint out of the tunnel to that. I've always kind of thought that, but those are probably like the quickest ones that came off the top of my head. I mean, there's a lot of them out there, but definitely at the top, it's Eminem for sure.
yeah, of course. I mean, I know it's a podcast, but you see our skin tone. Of course, back in high school, you and I were two guys who knew every word to "Lose Yourself," who knew probably to this day still know every word to "Lose
Mm-hmm.
Yourself" until I collapsed, and a couple of those Eminem songs. I remember actually just the other day, I think we were driving back from the beach or something, just throwing on a bunch of throwbacks, and my buddy dropped "Forever," the again, a song that connects music and sports, a
Oh, right.
song that Drake, Kanye, Lil Wayne, and Eminem
I literally put
assembled
that
for.
on like 2 weeks ago. The same thing is like, wow, I haven't heard this song in like 8 years. And yeah, and I could recite like
Every word, dude.
85%
I
of
knew
this thing.
all four verses,
Yeah.
every word from Drake all the way down to Eminem. It was basically like the Mount Rushmore of rap at that time. I'll still argue
Yes.
to this day, those four, all the new guys who have come up since then. Maybe you can throw Kendrick, maybe J. Cole, maybe Travis is getting there, but I still say no one has really reached the pinnacle that those four were at, especially at that time. And the only one to get them together was LeBron James, right? A documentary
Mhm.
about LeBron coming through high school, and that's what gathered all these guys together in a way that you could probably never do again. So again, it shows that intersection of how sports really connects people, and like these rappers who are mega stars. We're talking about those four, especially at that time, were bigger than a lot of rock stars at that point. That was kind of the transition where rappers became, super mainstream. Could all those guys could headline everything from Coachella
Mhm.
to Lollapalooza to stadiums around the world, and they come together on a song just because of LeBron. And I think that's definitely one of the ones that I threw on my playlist to go to pump up. It just it's like one of those songs back then. It's kind of like those high energy rap songs where it has a hook to it, so you vibe a little bit, but it builds and goes. I think that was the main key to my pump up playlist, was a bunch of songs that kind of like started slow and then always had that build up at the end. Um, and then also too, I think mixed in some like rock. I don't know if that was just me. I know a lot of people, if you like made the playlist for the group, for the team that was going through the loudspeaker, like you said, maybe you throw in "Gimme Shelter." Maybe that's because you were um, with some Midwest people who kind of trend that direction a little bit more. But I definitely knew when I was making the playlist for the team, there were some things that I would include myself, like some Black Keys or something that was just straight up, maybe some Led Zeppelin that was, a little bit more straight up rock that you wouldn't really play for like the whole mainstream. But I agree with you there. I think our playlists were obviously pretty similar. I wanted to go back to what you said, Dan. What do you think? Have you noticed maybe it's a pro player, or maybe there's somebody that you played with, or just going to a bunch of baseball games like you have throughout your life? What is one of the best walk-up songs you've heard of? Because you see a lot of times where guys, get creative with it. Sometimes it applies directly to them. Sometimes they're playing jokes. Sometimes a park will do something to kind of mock the other guys. What's an example of a walk-up song where you notice we're like, wow, the music is adding to the element of the game in a way that it wouldn't be there, that wouldn't give you that moment without music?
Well, I'm not going to say Baby Shark because that was the most annoying thing of all time with who is it? Whoever on the Nationals was
Yeah.
doing it, or yeah, Phillies, whatever team it
Yeah,
was.
it was the
Definitely
Nats.
not. Yeah, so absolutely not to that. There, I think UFC is a great example of guys coming out to music. That's one of the coolest things, right? I mean, Conor McGregor always coming out to Big
True.
Papa or something with Notorious B.I.G. So that's always pretty sick. Just speaking on experience from like, always going to Cubs games, Anthony Rizzo has come out for like as long as he's pretty since the songs came out. He comes out to the song Intoxicated. So every time it goes out, everybody's clapping along because it's like bum, 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 bum,
Yeah.
bum, bum. So like everybody's clapping along with it every time he goes up to bat. So when Rizzo's up and the fan starts, kind of paying attention and getting more geared up. So that's not necessarily like one where you're like locked in, let's go. It's more like an interactive and everybody's getting excited and jacked up because Rizzo's coming up the bat.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good one. I'm trying to think of the there was one recently where it was kind of ruthless. Like I forgot which some player got in trouble and they played a song that was like really related to like the little scandal that was building around him. I forgot what it was, but it was kind of like a almost a subtweet an instance. But I love when baseball teams do that and just kind of, when the professional teams, like Dan Levitar says this all the time, we see it a lot on social media now, where the professional teams don't act professional. They kind of take
Right.
that little step out there where you're like, oh, I don't know if that was okay. But then you remember it's sports. And also too, like if they're using music in a way, it's sports and music. Like these are things that are supposed to be fun. And when you take it too seriously, you kind of lose sight of a lot of times the greatness that is being in front of you, especially at these levels where, we're talking the peak of music and the peak of sports, like we are talking about with that Forever song with LeBron and guys like Kanye and Eminem, where I think they're so attracted to like the greatness. And you can see how when you're at the peak of one or the other, there's still an easy connection, because when like Kobe did a lot, he always wanted to attract and hang around people who are trying to be the best at what they do. And I think that's kind of what you see a lot with music and sports, is these people are at the pinnacle and they want to be they are attracted to other people who are also at the pinnacle. And I just love when those things cross. And then also too, when you can mix in a little humor in a way that only music can, you're not even saying anything. You're just playing a song and everybody gets the joke because of all the little insides to it. And it's just perfect. So
yeah, I mean, and just really quick, an example I was thinking of too. I mean, you think about Travis Scott and James Harden with Air on the Rockets, like Travis Scott's being such a big advocator for the team, like them. And then obviously with the Astros a little bit, regardless of the scandal. Just think about the song John Wall, how revolutionary that was when we
yes,
were growing up in
John
middle school. Everybody
Wall.
doing the John Wall. You never heard for those guys again, but like everybody knows that song to heart. And like that was just like the biggest one that came out, and arguably still could be one of the biggest revolving around an athlete.
Yeah, exactly. And going off of that, I know that's obviously a moment. I'm sure you might have had the same thing where that song comes on in a bar or a club and everybody starts doing it and you kind of immediately takes you back to that time. But on the flip side of that, what's one of your favorite memories that you had maybe at a sporting event where music was involved? Maybe it's, I don't want to lead you in a certain direction, but it could be something that's repeated often. Like every time you hear that song at a certain event, you're like, all right, I know the crowd's about to get super pumped up right now. Or is it a specific one where you just kind of had a connection where the music stood out almost more than the sporting event you were watching?
100%. There's two perfect examples here in Chicago. It's Go Cubs Go with the Cubs every time they win, especially after the World Series. Someday we'll go all the way. That's always a good one. That's just more of an emotional one too.
Yeah.
And Eddie Vedder being a big Cubs fan himself, like just doing that was great. So that was always fun to listen to. That's like a song I always post on opening day, because of the Cubs, and just Someday We'll Go All the Way. That's always a cool one. And then besides the Cubs, Chelsea Dagger for the Blackhawks has to be top dog, has to be top notch. I mean, you go to a Blackhawks game, just absolutely electric. You don't even have to be at a game. You could be at a bar, you could be with friends, and you play that after every goal or after a game, and you just go nuts. Like the impact that song and like how the crowd has made that is incredible. Like even when I was, because I went to the University of Nebraska, and at our parties, we would just, because there's a bunch of Chicago kids, a lot of guys from our area there. So we would just randomly throw the song on in the middle of a party and like everybody just go nuts, throwing your drinks everywhere. And it would be disastrous, but it was hilarious because everybody would just get so rowdy. So it's one of those songs that instantly click and you know how to behave because of what happens at the United Center when they played for the Blackhawks. So that's probably like the coolest one to just go nuts for, and just brings you so much nostalgia with it.
Yeah, shout out to the Fratellis. I remember when that song was going on back in those. I mean, I can't even say it's a specific time because the Blackhawks went on such a run, but anytime the playoffs were like immediately hearing that chant was like, that has to be a song. Like, what song is that? And finding that song and it being, I'm pretty sure back in those days, it was on like my top 25 most played on iTunes, because it's just so catchy. Like I wasn't even a Blackhawks fan, but it's so catchy. Just and just how it gets the whole crowd hyped. Like obviously they're hyped because you score a goal, but you take the music involved and it just takes it to that next level where the celebration's extended. If there's a goal, everybody yells. And once you run out of yelling, you kind of, maybe you get a little loud, but it's not as synchronized. And then when you throw in that chant, everybody's kind of in the same unison and it just drags it out and keeps that energy going into the next one. If they scored right away again, the place would just blow up. So I love that one. And Chicago's such a deep history in both music and sports. And when I was kind of thinking about ideas for today and just this podcast in general, there was a lot where I thought of, and specifically to Chicago. So I'm going to pose this question to you, Danny. You only get one choice. If you had to only pick one of some music that's connected to Chicago, I don't know if it's one of the Bears songs. I forgot what it's called. I know they have one because they're an ancient team, kind of like the Eagles song. You guys just don't get to play it very much. It's not famous because you guys never win. Or you got the Super Bowl shuffle. That kind of counts.
The Bear Down Chicago Bears is what you're thinking for the original one.
You have the, oh my gosh, I'm blanking. But like the intro for the Bulls with Michael Jordan back in the day.
Oh, right.
What's it? The Alan Parsons Project song.
Mm-hmm.
You have Chelsea Dagger for the Blackhawks. You have some Pearl Jam or Eddie Vedder related song, whichever one you want to choose for the Cubs. You have multiple for the Cubs. You have the one, the Go Cubs Go, when you fly the W. You also have the seventh inning stretch, Take Me Out to the Ball Game at Wrigley. So you only get, I don't think the White Sox have any cool names, or the Chicago Fire. I apologize if you guys have an anthem, any cool supporter drum beats, but those are kind of the ones I thought of specifically for Chicago. You're born and bred in the Midway City, so you only get one. Which one's the best one?
From all of those, man, it's tough because like me personally, the Cubs were like my absolute number one team growing up, and like literally my childhood room is painted Wrigley Field, and like when I was a kid and the Cubs had lost in the playoffs, I would be brought to tears. That's how emotional I was about the team. And like the Blackhawks again with Chelsea Dagger, it's so rowdy and it's so cool. But like I think at the end of the day, I think I have to go with Go Cubs Go, because if you think about it from like a partying kind of perspective too, like Chelsea Dagger, awesome. Yeah, you're in like an inside environment bar, the game, whatever it may be. I think I've only been to one or two Blackhawks games, honestly, because they're more expensive, is the better they got. In Cubs games, it's just such a great atmosphere being outside on the rooftop or at the bars. And even when you're just watching a game, kind of doing some day drinking with friends, and you throw the song on, and once you hear that first chorus, you're getting ready to go and sing along, and you're about to have a good night or rest of your day because the Cubs won. So I think it would have to be Go Cubs Go, because also that's, specifically unique to the Cubs, right? I mean, Chelsea Dagger is a song in itself that the Blackhawks adopted as their own, but Go Cubs Go is one that was just originally made for them in itself. So I think that's got to be numero uno for me.
That's fair. That day that they won the World Series, that Game 7, how many times did you hear that song that night?
I honestly, countless. I mean, at that point, I just tuned it out and was just, I'll be honest. I mean, the latter half of the night, I probably didn't remember most of it, but I definitely heard it so much. And then you're just, I was going home from the city because I drove back from Nebraska, drove the 8 hours that Thursday night, took all my quizzes and exams that day, hustled, picked up some buddies in Iowa City along the way, made it there during the first inning to the city. And just like, it was one of the greatest experiences of my life. And then doing that and then going to the parade on Saturday, just nonstop hearing it, and like on the train home, and it was incredible. I mean, top things, of course, that I've ever been involved in, no doubt about it. But yeah, that song just played on repeat the whole time. for the
I can
rest of
just
the year, honestly.
yeah, I could just imagine like anytime it's kind of just becomes second nature. Like you stop conversation mid conversation, just have to
Mhm.
say the words. You have to throw in the Go Cubs Go, no matter what you're doing. And it's not even like annoying anymore. You know, like sometimes when Sweet Caroline comes on somewhere, and that's another one that has some connection to Chicago.
Yes.
But like where Sweet Caroline comes on somewhere, people, you know, like stop, and half the people are annoyed, half the people are into it. Depends on the alcohol level, depends on the
Yes,
racial
for
diversity
sure.
in the room. But I feel like for that one, it's never annoying, especially that year. It's just all right, everybody has to stop. We have to get in because the Cubs finally won the
Sweet
World Series.
Caroline's only annoying when someone plays it too early at the party. You're like, yeah, of course, here it goes again, like whatever. But yeah, you got to wait till everybody's in the right mood of it, because that song's one obviously that gets overplayed wherever you are. But if you
Yeah.
hit it at the right spot, then it's gonna click anytime.
Yeah, that's when it all depends on the setting, right? So it comes on in Fenway, and I'm like, oh my God, yes, finally I get to sing.
Right.
I'm at Fenway, only time I've ever been at Fenway. I get to sing the song and I'm excited for it. You know, then we go to a football game back at Carolina where I went to school, and it gets twisted a little bit. You know, it's close, it almost fits. So they play it a bunch, and you're like, it's third quarter, we're down 21. I don't really want to
What
play
do
this
people
song
say?
right
Sweet
now.
Carolina? Is that what you say instead?
No, they say Sweet Caroline, but I'm just saying it's like a stretch of like, okay, it kind of fits,
Yeah.
but it's like not really.
Right. Not
It's just
authentic.
an excuse for everyone to go bump, 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 which I mean, that part's undeniably fun to do, but the rest of the song sometimes, especially if you're losing,
Mhm.
is not always the most fun. But speaking of that tradition, I know Chicago has a very, very rich sports tradition, but not so much on the college things. Sorry to Northwestern. They're out in Evanston. They don't have a really rich tradition of anything besides just their snarky journalists on Twitter telling everybody how great they are. But I think Chicago's probably a Notre Dame town, and that's a Notre Dame
Yep.
school that has a lot of tradition. They have one of the best fight songs ever. It's pretty iconic if you follow college sports. You, like me, went to a big school where at least sports mattered in a way that's kind of psychotic to some people. You know, they have all the pageantry. People on Saturdays in Lincoln would fill up Memorial Stadium. Almost, I think that place seats almost 100,000 now, in a way that is just absolutely mind-boggling, especially with how relatively unsuccessful Nebraska has been in the past few years. But people are still there day in, day out. And I think, well, the cool part about college is a lot of the times it's not even so much about the game, you know, because if you think about it, half these guys aren't going pro. They're not even the best level of the sport. They're 18 to 22-year-olds.
Mhm.
And people get so into it because of all the, like everyone likes to say, the pageantry that's built up around it. And a lot of that comes from music and the songs and the ways that people, you know, kind of sing together, the ways that unite around the stadium. So I don't know if there's one, if you're going to be biased, I understand. I can't really think of any cool Nebraska ones. So if you want to enlighten me, but what's one of the best college fight songs or song traditions you think of? Because you're a guy like me who just follows college sports for our entire lives, been playing NCAA football back when the video game was still a thing, where we know
Mhm.
fight songs for colleges that we never even went to or knew any family there. So what's one, if you had to pick one, the best one throughout the nation?
I do think it's got to be Notre Dame for me. I grew up a Notre Dame fan, but even unbiased wise, it's Notre Dame. Michigan also has a pretty good one, to be completely honest. So that's
Yeah.
showing how I'm unbiased there, saying it is a past Notre Dame fan. This isn't necessarily their song, but a tradition. Isn't it South Carolina that does Enter Sandman at the
No,
beginning of their,
so
or who
South
does that
Carolina does
one?
Sandstorm,
Or
where they
Sandstorm?
jingle all
That's
the
what it is.
keys. Virginia Tech does Enter Sandman on night games when they come out of the tunnel and they hit the
Okay.
rock.
So which one's more electric then? Which one am I thinking of?
I would say, I think Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I think it's Sandstorm, right?
No,
Is the more
that's
electric.
Sandstorm's like the dun, 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 dun. I'm
Oh,
probably
right,
gonna get
right.
sued
Okay,
how
okay.
much I'm singing on this podcast, but and then Enter Sandman, Metallica, probably famously litigious, is the do
Yeah,
do 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 do, and then the Virginia Tech comes out and they hit the
that's
rock and
true.
everyone goes crazy.
That's
They just
right.
haven't been in a lot of primetime games lately either.
Yeah. I know Sandstorm would be awesome to do once, I think. Like Enter Sandman's sick. Like that is absolutely nuts. But I feel like in that environment, like doing Sandstorm, which is already a party song, and if you're a drunk college kid in that setting, I feel like that would just be absolutely insane. But I mean, they're both epic. But yeah, that would be nuts too. But that's not obviously, like a traditional song. But I think so. Yeah, I guess at the end of the day, honestly, Notre Dame's probably got to be top tier for me.
Yeah,
Which is kind of a
especially with the
simple answer
way,
because you already alluded to it. But I mean, honestly, like you think of college, that's the first one that comes to my mind.
I mean, yeah, too, and the way they run out and this little touchdown Jesus,
Mhm.
in the Golden Domes, no one else can claim any of those things. That is something that's very unique to and their fight song is, even if you don't know the words, you still know the tune. Even if you're rooting against Notre Dame that day, you still start, they score a touchdown, like like if you're a college
Mhm.
sports fan, you know, just kind of that beat, and you know everything that comes with it, whether you love it or hate it, especially if you're the generation before us, where you probably really love Notre Dame or really hate Notre Dame and still have those kind of deep connections to it, where that music always comes across in a way that stands out, especially in a world or in a landscape that has so many different traditions, and some good, some bad. You know, you kind of look at Texas where they have an iconic song, and you look back at some of the history of it and like, oh, we don't really know how we should think about these things. But even then, they still kind of have a way of unifying people. And it's interesting how it kind of goes through history where maybe in the beginning it wasn't always the best intentions. Maybe some of the lyrics kind of are problematic, but the music part of it still had a way of connecting people. And now we're retweaking them in a way where we don't want to lose that unification. We just want to, progress it into the next age, progress it into an era where we're trying to be more unified. And it's one of the things that I think is crazy about sports, where these conversations come up, because sports are the one thing where people throw out kind of their biases, at least on the surface, to root for one thing. It's kind of messed up a lot, but it's kind of weird, right? How, to throw out like Utah fans or something, where people say, okay, they might be a very, very hostile crowd, right? Where the road team goes in and feels not unsafe, but they feel like, wow, these Utah fans are really giving it to us in some ways that might be racially charged or not. And then they still find a way to root for, their own players in a way that kind of just makes them blind to a lot. So I think if we kind of, these are two things where people kind of throw away their biases just to feel that emotion and their connections to sports and race, and not to be all, try existential here, but kind of that mindset of, if people connected that to kind of how they spoke about the world, kind of how they connected to other people in the world, it might be a better place. And I think that's kind of why we see these so many deep connections, because people are so easily emotive and connected to sports and music that it finds a way to bring people together in ways that other things don't. And I think college sports, to kind of wrap it up, is really a prime example of that, of where you have so many people from different backgrounds, different ages, alumni from generations past, to, like you said, the drunk college students who doesn't know what the heck they're doing, and they're all doing the same thing at the same time. It's just kind of a really cool part, and something that I want to dive into as we go through this podcast, hopefully, of how those connections really bring people together when they're so far apart sometimes, if that made any sense.
Oh, absolutely. And, you talk about collegiate versus professional, and growing up, I was never like huge into college sports by any means. Again, I was a Notre Dame fan, but it wasn't like I was geared up every weekend to watch college football all day nonstop. I mean, college basketball, yeah, Illinois was awesome with their team back in the day. D. Brown Luther had Williams and everything. That was the excitement around here. But it was mostly March Madness, that I would be excited for. And it was all professional that I was so geared up with. And then obviously going to Nebraska, where you're forced to be obsessed with it. Not that I wouldn't have anyways, but you have to be passionate about it and covering it and whatnot. As I become more and more of a sports bettor, you have to take your bias out of it. You have to take emotion out of it and bet against some of your favorite teams from time to time. So like, for example, I said I grew up a diehard Cubs fan, and, I still am, but the same passion, as sad as it is, isn't necessarily there, because, I'll bet against the Cubs from time to time. I'll be realistic and say like, hey, I don't trust this team, or, I'm just not watching every game as much as I did. Same thing with the Bulls. Bears is a little bit different, because I mean, it's not like as frequent of a game, and I haven't seen success from the Bears since they went to the Super Bowl and lost, because I saw the Cubs finally win a World Series. The Bulls, they had the Derrick Rose years, which still was an absolute tease. And like, I'm still looking forward to the Bulls from this past season, but that they were going to be disappointing in the end, which they kind of were, but still hope to look forward to. Nevertheless, my main point being is that, like, I think now Nebraska is like my top team that I'm like the most passionate about, in the sense that, like, I'll still talk crap about them, I'll still fade them and whatnot, but there's more of that, just I don't know.
Connection.
Yeah, kind of right. Because it's like, you went there, you paid money to go to that university, and like you have to back it up to your friends. You and all your friends most of the time are the same fans, right? I mean, like my friends and I all love the Bears. We all love the Bulls. Some love the Sox, some love the Cubs. But not everybody loves Nebraska. They're going to give me crap for Nebraska because they stink, and rightfully so. So when they're good, I think it's even more passionate to get up on Saturdays and root for this Cornhusker team that still should be a bigger program and be better, but they're not. But it's just something there that just really intertwines you more so and gives you that love and affection for it a little bit more so than professional sports, because you have that connection. People always give other people crap when they say we when they're talking about a team. It's like, you don't play on the team, and you can't say that for a college team, but you went to the school there. Like, that's your pride, that's your team. You contributed to that university in some kind of sense. So it's just a different feeling there when you get connected with a certain theme song, with just driving in random places and you see those stickers, and you just have the chant, like "Go Big Red" is what it is for us. Someone said that to me when I wore Nebraska gear at the Arlington racetrack years ago. I remember in Chicago, like just little stuff like that really connects you, and music is a huge factor in that. And that's why I think even collegiately is top of the game when it comes to just sporting events musically.
Yeah, exactly. All right, before we get you out of here, Danny, play a game that everybody knows that we kind of added a little twist back in our days at VSiN. Would you rather?
It's time for Would You Rather. ¿Qué prefieres?
Would you rather be an athlete or top of the game musician?
So originally, I had to take a second to think about it, but then I kind of quickly came to my senses. And for me, it's definitely professional athlete, because just, well, the argument you can make, I guess, first, the con is with, being a top musician, you have, a lot more longevity with your career, right? So obviously you can sustain that for pretty much your whole life. With being an athlete, not so much. But I think you get put on a little bit bigger stage as an athlete, in the sense that, people can be picky with music. Not everybody may know J. Cole, but everybody knows LeBron James. Like, if I asked my mom one or the other, she would know LeBron. She would maybe know J. Cole, probably not. J. Cole's one of my favorite rappers. But point being is that, like, you're more of a role model too, is an athlete. And I think that it's easier for an athlete, say, to become a better musician than it is vice versa. Like Damian Lillard, for example, like after he retired, what if, he could become, somewhat of a decent musician? J. Cole's trying to do the opposite, but look, he's playing in the African League, and, he's not going to be a star in that league by any means. It's a great story. It's awesome.
Yeah, he's already done.
Right. But it's so hard to just, come out of nowhere and be an athlete. Like, you have to be in the top whatever percent, 1%, even less than that. Musician, you can kind of get dumb lucky and just be at the top of the game, like a, Chief Keef, I don't know, just anybody who's making dumb rap, like Lil Pump, like stuff like that. And it's not to knock anybody in the music industry. It's just,
you can lock Lil Pump. That's okay.
Yeah. But it's just like to show that, like, if you're at the top of the game athletically, you are just a different breed. Musically, yes, you can be talented. You can experiment more. You talk about DJs who can be successful. I'm not saying that's not talent, but in the sense of, like, that's different than someone who could just absolutely kill it on the piano or kill it on the saxophone. And those are the guys who are just absolutely incredible. I'm not saying you could translate to that, but if you're looking more hip hop or electronically, like Shaq's a DJ too, if you think about it, he does a lot of stuff like that. So I think if I was trying to do both, and regardless of what I'd want to do, and just a little bit more passionate about in terms of what I do personally, not like listening versus watching, but like playing, one or the other, it's got to be sports for me. So I would choose athlete.
You brought up some good points. I think my counter is just the longevity, right? So if you're a musician, but you said that was a good key way of doing it, where you said you can be an athlete, then you can be the musician after. Like, maybe that's what Dame Dollar does. And Damian Lillard, transitions to Dame Dollar. He can do that even if he's injured or if he's down for the season. But I think if, as a musician, you kind of have that longevity, and if maybe it's not something that you want more, like you said, if you're a pro athlete, you're a lot more recognizable. You could be a giant band like the Rolling Stones, and people our age know who the Rolling Stones are, might be able to recognize Mick Jagger, but how many people know who Keith Richards is? Right. Maybe they'll know the name, but Keith Richards is a legendary guitarist and still lives on, and his music lives on, but he might not get that facial recognition, which, I mean, to me, it might be a good thing, because I think the way we're going in today's society of how, social media and how recognizable people are and stuff, that I kind of would like the money without the recognition, to be able to go places and kind of have that low key
That's
where
true.
not many people recognize you, but you still have the access, you still have the funds to basically get exactly what you want and do what you want to do, but you don't
Yeah,
have
that's a good
people
point.
harassing you all the time. Because you look at like basketball, right? Where I'm trying to think, just for instance, where somebody like Kelly Oubre, right, walks into a place, everybody knows, even if they don't know, they know that he plays basketball. They know that he's
You just
somebody.
see how big he is. He's like, this guy's doing something,
Yeah,
like
and even too, his
athletically.
face is like more recognizable, right? Where, of course, well, because he's really freaking pretty, but his face is so recognizable in a way that, like, the running back for the Bears, I guess right now, Tariq Cohen, solid career, right? He's a decent contributor. He's got a helmet on. He can walk wherever he wants, even probably in parts of Chicago. No one's gonna know who he is, you know. So I think there's that twist and turn of which one is going to be less recognizable. And I think, because obviously if I was playing sports, I probably wouldn't be a football player. So probably be like basketball or something where you kind of have a little bit more of the detractors that go along with it. And like we've seen with Naomi Osaka, where the mental health part of it is maybe a little bit more strenuous, where you have to answer questions all the time. You know, as a
Right.
musician, you kind of coast by yourself. Like you look at Frank Ocean, that guy's massive, supposed to headline Coachella. Maybe one day he finally will, but no one even talks to him. You can kind of decide your own fate, kind of do things as you wish, put your music out when you want. There's still, of course, the pressure of the label and trying to, you know, you have to get to that level before you can actually start deciding what you want to do. I think the way, even more so, just the connection that you get, you can reach a lot more people with music in a way that sports, you know, some people are so closed off to sports that they don't get those same connections. You know, Damian Lillard hits that shot where, you know, guys like you and I are always going to remember when he hit where we were when he, you know, hits that crazy shot against the Thunder, or you kind of like spark back to those memories because of the crazy things he does. But that's such a small group of sports fans, and even smaller group of like the Portland fans that were at the game, you know.
Right.
If you're kind of like a middle tier musician, like take for instance Claro or something, right? Like she's a small indie artist getting bigger now, but you can find those connection points so many places of random people, and they just connect with you through the music of something that you made, and people are singing back your own words to you that you wrote down in your room one night. Like that's insane to me. That feeling, I can't even imagine like putting into words. Is like people, a whole crowd, you know, they're cheering for you when you hit a huge three. Like that must be amazing. But that rush of these people are singing back something I created to me, and like all connecting that way, I think it's probably, and I think a lot of artists talk about it too, is like one of the peak feelings a human could ever feel. So I think that's probably why I would lean musician. And also too, when we lost this past year with COVID, when we didn't have sports for a while, where I thought like sports was always my number one, and then finally like something took it away where we just like didn't have them, kind of made me realize like, oh, music's always going to be there. Like through everything, music is recession proof. It is, you know, the cure for when times are terrible. It is the thing people use to joyously celebrate when times are great. So I think I lean towards musician, but obviously it's a really, really hard choice. I'll take either one. Better than being the guy who, you know, so far sort of failed at both. And that's why we're talking about it instead of actually doing it.
That's right. No, you bring up an excellent point. I mean, especially the side of looking at how your lyrics can connect to someone, and really, you know, it's corny, I guess, to say, but people say, you know, like these lyrics saved my life, you know, this guy's music saved my life. And that's true. And I mean, you could say the same thing with an athlete in a sense, like looking up to people and just being a motivation tool, but it's a completely different animal with music. And yeah, I mean, having people sing back something you create, I mean, you nailed that. That's a good point. And then also just the sense of, I think you're right, going where like, if you're just going somewhere, maybe a random concert, festival, or just on the street, or you hear someone listening to an artist or a song that's kind of low key, or you play and someone goes, oh, I love this song, or this or that, you just get so excited and get you like, oh, really? And then you talk more about it. How'd you find this song? Do you listen to more of them? You know, et cetera, stuff around that. With a shot, like you said, Damian Lillard, you know, everybody saw that. You know, everybody, if they didn't, they're going to see it on Twitter, and it's cool to talk about when you're, you know, having a couple drinks with some buddies in the bar, but you're not having a full connection because it's not like a personal thing. In a sense, it's more like it was a big event that everybody knew about and saw, versus, you know, a very personal connection with, you know, a song that relates to you and to this other person who you may or may not know. And then you kind of just connect with them more on a one-on-one basis. So I completely get your point. I just think for me at the end of the day, like what I would enjoy doing more so would still just be the athlete, because of the bigger stage you're going to be on it. Because I just, you know, I play more sports than I do instruments personally. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like I'm kind of someone, and it's gonna sound funny to say, but like, me and my buddies, like, we would always freestyle or like record a couple of raps, like any kind of dumb kids would do and stuff. And like, I always say though, too, I asked my friends this question. I was like, if you could do one thing in your life, just pick it up and excel at it, what would it be? And I guess like maybe, barring sports or maybe even included, I always go like, be able to play the piano exceptionally well. Piano or like saxophone, I think would be unreal. And a lot of people think, oh, what about guitar? But think about how unique it is if you're at a party or something and there's just a piano out there and you just go out there just absolutely whipping all these like nuts tunes. And like from back in the day, like we had a friend who comes to our party sometimes, so we'll just do that. We're like, what's wrong with you, dude? Like, this is insane. I think that would be crazy. Like guitar, like, a lot of people play guitar. Not everybody excels at it, of course, but it's more rare to just see someone go on a piano and just go on a piano and just absolutely nail it. I think that's one of the coolest things if someone's really good at like playing the piano or the saxophone too, and can just do that whenever. Like when I'm walking downtown, some people play it on the corners. I'm just like, dude, good for you. That's awesome. I love hearing that sound. So like, yeah, I mean, so I really get both sides at the end of the day, just a little bit more passionate about wanting to do personally with playing the sports. But in terms of watching though, /listening, I mean, I definitely listen to more music than I watch live sports. I will say that.
True. I think that's a great point of, people, if you're really good, people don't complain. So if you're really good at one of the two, the more impressive things to pull out of a party is if you're really good at an instrument or singing or something musical is going to be a lot more impressive to the party. You're going to bring more to the party than if you're really good, say there's a basketball shows up and you start playing some sport and you're really good. Like you're going to be more impressive if you're really good at the musical part. So I agree with you that was a great point. All right, before we get out of here, Danny, you mentioned freestyle. I'm gonna drop a beat for you real fast.
What's the topic?
Go off.
That's for that's the platinum version of the podcast. You got to subscribe to that.
You got to pay for that. Just the lost tapes. Do you have a rapper name?
No, not necessarily. Never. I mean, like,
Danny Burke's a solid rapper. Yeah, that's like a classic, like Sammy Adams type vibe, right. Like white college rapper, like really would have taken off, played some sorority functions,
exactly.
Goes crazy, goes on the tours in the summer.
Yeah, people just call me D Burke growing up. That's like really the big nickname that I only had was D Burke. So maybe that
sounds more like a DJ, almost like DJ D Burke.
Yeah, DJ D Burke. There you go. Next career path, baby.
All right, hey, there's still time. We're still young. All right, we appreciate you joining this first conversation with me, Danny. You can catch him on the Rush Hour on VSiN. If you're really into sports betting, this guy's one of the best up and coming. Catch him Monday through Friday on that show, or Bet on Chicago if you're in the great city, midway city of Chicago, the Windy City. Catch him there talking about his favorite teams that he likes to bet against because they all stink lately. But it's okay, they'll bounce back. Cubs are in first place now, so thanks for looking up for you. All right, that's Danny Burke. My name's Sean Cavanaugh. Thanks for listening to Chords and Courts. Catch you next time.